Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the CODA podcast, Plugging Away. My name is Rean Gilbert, and I am the General Manager here at CODA. I am very excited today as I'm surrounded by amazing people, who I will introduce shortly, to discuss the brand new special interest group being launched by CODA, called Women in Decommissioning. CODA currently runs 3 special interest groups around strategic themes involved in decommissioning. Currently, we have project management in decommissioning, hazardous material management, and well P&A. These SIGs, as they are affectionately known, are a good place to share ideas and network with other like-minded people. Our latest special interest group that we are here to talk about today is called Women in Decommissioning. So let me introduce you to my amazing guests. Pia Turcinov is a CODA board member and an ambassador for the Women in Technology WA. Frances Norman is the CEO of CODA. Simona Chady is the commercial director of CB&I, previously known as Petrofac. Pawel Rybczynski is the communications lead at CODA. And last but certainly not least, we have Carrie McIntosh, decommissioning manager at XODUS, and also the chair of our new special interest group. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for coming here today to talk to me about women in decommissioning. I'd like to start with some introductions, and perhaps each of you can give me maybe a 2-minute introduction to yourself and how you ended up working in the field of decommissioning. Pia, shall we start with you?
Thanks, Rean, and thanks for having me as part of this conversation. It's great to sit down with everyone. So my journey with CODA is a squiggly line, like the most of my career. My professional background is law, commercial corporate law, and then spending too many decades in the commercialization and technology space. I had the privilege of being a board member of what was then NERA, National Energy Resources Australia board, when that was set up way back when, and CODA became a project in that ecosystem that then gained momentum. And when we decided to spin out CODA as a standalone entity, I very quickly and eagerly put up my hand and went, I would like to be involved in that journey, and stepped off NERA and became a board member of CODA. And that is how I ended up in decommissioning.
Thank you. That's a lovely way of starting us off on our podcast. Carrie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks for having me. This is the first time I've ever been on a podcast, so I'm pretty excited. As Rean said, my name's Carrie, and I am the manager of decommissioning at XODUS. We do environmental and engineering consulting. I guess my background is in environmental science. That's how I met Rean also. I worked in energy and consulting for a couple of decades, I guess, in Perth, and went and spent quite a few years at NOPSEMA as a regulator. After that, I went out to XODUS and started doing consulting with their group. We do a lot of offshore energy kind of projects. And I sort of gravitated over to decommissioning because I was looking for something new, I guess, in terms of working more in engineering and out of regulatory. And decommissioning has a really good link, I suppose, with environmental science and environmental regulation. So my skills were useful. The team is great. I really enjoy this mixture of environmental science and regulatory plus engineering and learning something new all the time. XODUS has a great team, and we also get to sort of work on the cusp of oil and gas companies and energy companies, along with the supply chain and, decommissioning contractors. So I like that interface as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Carrie. How about you, Pav?
Thank you. Thank you so much for involving me in this conversation. It's not often I get to be on the podcast. I'm always doing the editing work for it. So, yes, Pawel Rybczynski is my name, and I've been with CODA now since November 22, I believe it was. So my journey, how did I get to CODA and decommissioning? This is my first oil and gas stint. Before that, I worked at Curtin University, where I completed my degree. Spent a few years there, and then I actually moved to Europe. Lived there for a few years and worked for a branding agency over there. That gave me a lot of exposure to international companies and the way that they do marketing and branding, and I saw a lot of good examples of design there. So I learned a lot, had some fantastic colleagues there, some great designers that I got to shadow and pick up a lot in terms of good design, good communications, and what works, what doesn't work. Unfortunately, I was able to bring that back here to Australia. I did another couple of years at Curtin University, and then decided tertiary education wasn't for me anymore. So I started looking for opportunities, and the one with CODA popped up and put my hand up for it, and I'm very thankful. I'm just looking at my CEO here, Francis. I'm very grateful for them taking me on, because it's been a wonderful journey. As Pia mentioned earlier, CODA's not that old. It really felt like a startup when I joined. In many ways, it sometimes still does. There's only 4 full-timers, I believe. So it's been a great team to work with, and it's been great to see the growth. I think we only had 20 odd partners when I joined up, and now we're well over 180 industry partners. So it's been a fantastic journey with CODA, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we go from here as well. So I believe that's enough about me.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pav. That growth in the partners certainly a testament to your hard work that you do every day. So thank you, Francis. Would you like to go next?
Yeah, I will go next. So Francis Norman. I get the great job. I'm the CEO here. I get to work with some great people on a really interesting space. How did I end up here? I had 34 years traveling the world as an engineer, settled in Australia. Partway through that in 98, we emigrated here. Had a change of career. 2013, had a change of career. And then 2016, first started working with Pia at NERA. And then as NERA was starting the journey of establishing CODA, I got very, very interested in what CODA could become. And as we worked through the whole process of spinning out. So that was, Pav talked about us being a startup. 2021, we were very much the startup, spinning out, trying to work out how we were going to pay our bills for the first few months, all those good things that go with not just startups these days, some bigger businesses with the same challenges. And then since then, it's been CEO, working on growing the organisation. So I often say to people, we don't actually do the work. We do all the work helping the people that do the work, and that's very much what we do. And it's such a privilege to work in such an interesting industry with such a diverse group of stakeholders and some incredibly passionate and very open people. One of the things I comment on a lot when I talk about decommissioning relative to all the other facets of the industry is how open and how sharing people are compared to so many of the other spaces within the sort of resources life cycle, where it's a lot more cutthroat, if you like. It's a lot more competitive, a lot less sharing goes on in there. So yeah, that's me. That's what got me to where I am. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Francis. And last but certainly not least, Simona, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Simona Chady. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this group. I started off my career in the upstream business. I spent 10 years at Shell, across projects in Australia, Singapore, Russia, and then based in London for a few years. And then I moved to Total for 10 years, where I was in the headquarters out of Paris. Primarily, my experience has been across LNG, gas, major projects, gas shale, and oil sands. So I've had actually quite a limited period in decommissioning, and I have to say it's a pretty interesting space to be in. Spent a stint heading up a hydrogen research project here in Australia when I returned in 2023, and since joined Petrofac, now CB&I as Solutions, as the commercial director at APAC. We, of course, were responsible for the NEDCOM, or I should say Northern Endeavour decommissioning project. So one of the most interesting projects I worked on at a large scale, and I'm happy to be sharing some of the experiences that I had on there. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Simona. So I want to dive a little bit deeper now, because we are here to introduce the new special interest group of women in decommissioning. So Pia, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. As an ambassador of Women in Technology WA, and in your experience, how do you feel that both men and women contribute to building a more inclusive industry?
Well, that is a big question, isn't it? We could talk hours around that. Reflecting on the first issue, I think, is that this is not unique to decommissioning by any sense, and that I think women across various industries are grappling with a similar conversation. So I've been involved with women in technology and had the privilege of chairing women in technology for a number of years. And the name says it itself. What we're trying to do is introduce more women and young girls into the technology space. But technology intersects with so many other industries. The lesson there is around the inclusivity of the conversation. So from a male perspective, it is the importance of the male allies and the role that men play in this conversation. We had a lot of pushback in the early days. Oh, it's women in technology. It'll be women in decommissioning. Therefore, a man will not feel comfortable stepping into the conversation. And really breaking down that barrier was crucial, inviting men into the conversation and the dialogue from the get-go, and really empowering the men to feel comfortable to be the allies that we need them to be. Because the reality is it's senior leadership positions and positions of power are very much held by men. We need the men to open the door, not only mentor. I often say that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. We need men to sponsor women to get them into the roles that are visible and that are executive roles. So that's from a male perspective. From a female perspective, from the woman's role, it's complex. I think we need that support structure. But in essence, again, it's about role modeling and visibility. We need to build the support structure and scaffold women to feel comfortable to step into this spotlight and take on that mantle of, I'm a role model in decommissioning. What can I bring to the table? How can I bring junior women through? How can I create a seat at the table or at the meeting or at the conversation, and really enable each other to build that? I'll stop there because we can unpack that more if you want to.
Yeah, no, I think we should. Do Francis or Pav have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I mean, so my partner, she hates me for doing it, but I always do it. I always make Formula One references, and I think that's a similar industry or similar area where it's historically it's been male dominated, and I think in the recent years they've made a real conscious effort, to change that. Susie Wolf with Formula One Academy, but then also it's Red Bull has been highly, I think, showing off the good work of the female engineers and the pit wall crew, that they do, and they've given them much more airtime. And I think what's important there is for the younger generations, or for the younger girls, to have someone to aspire to be shown that it's possible, you can do it. Not, if you grow up your whole life just seeing men on TV, then you think to yourself, well, what's the point, perhaps? So it's, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said there, Pia.
I think for me, the great match or the great opportunity that we've got when we're starting a group like Women in Decommissioning is just to really reflect on the multifaceted way that we work in decommissioning. All of our projects are so unique and they're so complex. So it doesn't actually just take one type of thinking or one discipline of expertise. Decommissioning in Australia requires a whole lot of multifaceted, multidimensional work and integration of lots of ideas all together. So for me, bringing women in is important, but also it's more broadly just about diversity and improving or increasing the diversity of the teams that are working on decommissioning projects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when we're talking about engineering, for example, I've noticed there are a lot more men in engineering, and when you're talking about environment, I find that there's a lot more women represented in the environment space. But Carrie, do you need to be an engineer to work in the decommissioning space?
Well, that's a great question, Rean. I mean, of course we don't. I'm not an engineer myself. I'm an environmental scientist. I think also the conversations I have at work about decommissioning, of course, include the engineering perspective and the environment perspective, but also legal, financial, safety, and increasingly community, Indigenous, all sorts of other different aspects. So that's not even to do with gender, but it's more, there's cultural issues there, and there's certainly different types of professional disciplines that go into these decisions. And yeah, like I say, I just think it's so multifaceted. It's really not all about engineering.
I'll jump in there because it made me, your comment made me reflect is similarly with women in technology. One of the core things we grappled with was, what does technology look like? So the guy in a dark basement with a hoodie in front of a keyboard,
quite
that was
sinister, actually.
technology. Exactly. So I think that to your point, reshaping that image of what women in decommissioning or what an industry expert in decommissioning looks like. That will enable, I think, a lot more conversations and do people see themselves stepping into the space.
Yeah, if I could sort of join in on that conversation there. Engineering has, through my career, changed enormously. And when I think back to when I first started, the first engineering office I worked in was a sea of white men. The only difference was how old they were, what colour their hair was, if they had any hair or not. That was it. Other than that, that was it. It was first 5 or 6 years, I actually didn't think there were any women engineering. It wasn't until we started to meet a few of them in there, and that was very much the UK back in the 80s when this was all getting started. When I look at where we are now, when I look at this industry in particular in the decommissioning space, it's like working with the United Nations. It really is. We've got people from all over the world. We've got everybody represented in there. And I think to your point, Carrie, that brings so much interest and it brings so much strength to the industry. The diverse ideas that we get, people's backgrounds, males, females from different parts of the world and everything else that we have. And I was just thinking while the rest of you were talking there, when I think back across the previous 22 or so episodes of this that we've recorded, there's actually been a lot of women on those episodes as well. And it's not that we sit there and think, oh, we need a man this time, we need a woman the next time. We're sitting there thinking, who are the best voices? Who are the smartest people for us to talk to? And they are Susie in the UK with the wells. It is Nina in Norway with the wells. It's people like that who are the leaders in their industry and in their space. And it would not have been like that in this industry 20 years ago. So it's a really, really, really interesting time to be in this space.
Yes, I agree completely. I think from a decommissioning perspective, there's so many different roles and areas of expertise. We had a podcast recently where we were, was it Tommy Angel? Or, offshore network, they are also working in the decommissioning space, but they are organizers of events. And so I guess my next question would be for Pav. Decommissioning is a very technical thing. We just spoke about engineering and the importance of that. But from a communications perspective, Pav, how do we tell the story of the industry in a way that attracts people from different disciplines, backgrounds, and genders?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that one, because I think, when I came into CODA, I actually had no idea what decommissioning was. And then I started looking into it a little bit more. Obviously, do I want this job? It has been quite technically focused, engineering focused, solutions focused, because obviously, again, sorry, might not be obvious, but, decommissioning has a lot of problems, unknown unknowns, right? Where you need these solutions. So a lot of emphasis has been placed on that. However, the one thing that I noticed that really was a stark standout was the fact that, I guess, the purpose story. What's the purpose of decommissioning? That's not really told well enough. So you've got returning infrastructure in a safe manner. You've got this the protecting the environment aspect of it, and managing the end of an era, story. It's not necessarily all about just the solutions. It's about, decommissioning needs lawyers, it needs project managers, it needs data analysts, it needs communications specialists. It needs a lot of different, not just engineers. And I think what's lacking is the story of the purpose of decommissioning. Not just what needs to happen. If the regulation says that it needs to happen, it's all the benefits that you can, if done right, all the additional benefits that you
It's
can
a good
add
news
to that.
story, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that good news story I don't think is told enough historically. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Francis, but I've observed that not enough of the operators talk about their good wins. The wins in decommissioning. Traditionally, at least anyway, people have sort of shied away from talking about decommissioning.
Well, a key moment for me was when we were still, this is pre-CODA set up, when we were at NERA, and one of the projects we did was around decommissioning, but the artificial reef and the repurposing of that infrastructure. You remember that one?
I do. King Reef, as it's now known. Yep.
King Reef, that's right. And I really, that was a key moment for me as personally, where I sat there and I thought, this is just so exciting. This intersection between industries that traditionally would have been seen as adversarial, and with such a good outcome. And I can still picture the video that was created as a result of that. That impact, and to Pav's point, that good news story, that's where as an industry we need to lean in and tell those stories better.
Yeah, I have that as well. As a marine scientist, I love those stories. Anything that involves fish and coral and marine habitats. I mean, Simona, do you have anything in particular that excites you about the future, the future of decommissioning?
What excites me is the fact that we're at early stages in Australia in the decommissioning space. So we still have an opportunity now to take what we've learned elsewhere and build something that is well structured from the beginning, rather than retrofitting after the fact, which tends to be the case in oil and gas more broadly. So that's a really interesting part of the value chain to be involved in, not only for women but for everyone. But when I look at some of the statistics of the representation of women in oil and gas more broadly, we're looking at 13% in oil and gas versus 48% of the broader Australian workforce. And although I felt generally a little bit hesitant to be involved in a gender-specific group, when I look at those statistics, I feel a sense of responsibility to be part of a solution to change diversity of thought and perspective, and if not me, then whom? So that I think it is true what Pav was saying earlier. You can't be what you can't see. So it's important that we put up our hand, get involved, not only to encourage greater perspective and diversity, but also to be part of the growth of the industry and the development of the industry.
Yeah, which is a lovely segue for me to ask my CEO. You've been building a diverse and inclusive organization, and that is an important goal, I agree. But what does that commitment look like for you in practice, and where do you think the industry still needs to be pushed?
Oh, heavens. How long have we got? What I would say is when we were recruiting, whereas we'd been building the team, it wasn't conscious that we needed to have a particular gender split or anything like that. It was very much we wanted to find the right people who came with the right attitude, aptitude, capabilities, strengths, and everything else to fit into our very weird little team that were so passionate about what we had and what we were doing. And what we've ended up with is an absolutely amazing group of people. Yes, we've got, from a staff perspective, from a team perspective, Pav and I are the only two males on our team.
And that's why you're both here today. So we have the entire 100% male commitment of CODA.
100% representation, absolutely. So in that regard, absolutely, it's been, as I say, it wasn't conscious, but what we've seen and what we've experienced as it's come together has just been a phenomenal team of people. What we have now is this amazing asset from a capabilities perspective, exactly to what you were saying, Simona, that this is now, when people are looking at, okay, first off, most people in the community don't know what decommissioning is all about. So when they hear about it and they get the chance to hear about it, isn't it lovely that the people they can hear about it from are so diverse? that we have senior women and junior women. We have senior and junior men in our team. They can see all of that. They can see the contribution as part of understanding that this industry actually exists and what this industry stands for in terms of safe closure, removal, recycling, and preparing for whatever comes next is such a strong message for me. But so many people, when I talk to them about what I do, what we do, what the industry does, the first thing is you can see it and it's like, oh, how do I get involved in that? So being able to do that from the position of an organization which is genuinely diverse, but at its core is there through merit, I think it puts us in a really strong position for helping to tell some of those stories.
And I think a few weeks ago when we first started thinking about putting together this group, we had a conversation together and we were like, well, we actually have a reasonably diverse workplace where we work. Like I work with some great women and some great men. And when I'm doing decommissioning projects, some of the senior people in the other project teams are also women. But I think, we are all based in Perth and we've all been to decommissioning events and nights where there's a panel speaking or a conference or whatever. And I think we all have also recognized that often we do get a panel full of men or a speaker list full of men. So it is still happening. And I think there's still some improvement that we could make with representation, as you say. And I think it's a really good time to be able to collect the women that do work in decommissioning and start a more, a group with more intention and focus on this issue for a while.
I totally agree. And I think that the opportunity there is not to only gather them and create that common network, but then also you have a central point where the industry can go to source those speakers, to source the panelists, to source the experts. In which where the slogan is, if you can see her, you can be her. And the role models, they're now 300 plus in that group. I think it would be very exciting to have the decommissioning role model group where, we can then hold the industry accountable when we have a mammal, when there's just men on the panel and, that there's no excuse for that anymore. So, but then again, of the conversation is, well, I didn't know where to find them, or we looked, but we couldn't find any women. So making it easy for the industry to find that talent source, I think is really key. And I think that's where the industry group will play a big role.
I'd like to add to that as well. It's not only about finding the women, but finding the women that want to do the speaking. Yes, there's often times where women will get speaking opportunities and won't feel prepared, but we have to also step up and we have to step out of our comfort zones and do things that sometimes make us feel a little bit uncomfortable, because if you keep getting asked to present or to speak at conferences and the answer you get constantly is no, then eventually you're going to go to the more confident members and they'll end up with the speaking slot. So it's about preparing women as well. So I'll just circle this back to women in decommissioning and our special interest group. And that is part of the activities that we're going to be conducting. So it's not just networking and chatting, and as much as that's also fun. It's about preparing women so that we are ready when the opportunities do come.
Yes, we need to learn to say yes and then figure it out, as opposed to overthink it and say no in the first instance.
Absolutely. And that's why we're all here today, right? So we're all stepping out of our comfort zone.
Thinking off our feet as we speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think it's then all of our jobs to make sure that that person then feels comfortable to say yes.
Absolutely. And just talking about diversity, yes, this is the group. It's called Women in Decommissioning. But do you think, and this is open to anyone who wants to answer it, do you think that we are diverse enough, and not just from a gender perspective, but is the industry diverse enough?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I guess there are always ways in which you could make a group more diverse. I don't know. I think the space where I work, which is this interface between environmental approvals and technical engineering, I think has a big opportunity to, I suppose, improve on or expand on the thinking around long-term use of the public space. It's more these end state decisions and things are really key to how we manage Australia's natural resources. And these are public issues and they affect the community. I think in the long term, when we look back in 100 years' time, companies will come and go, projects will come and go, but decommissioning has a legacy forever, in the marine environment or on land as well. And I think that the opportunity to increase diversity and thinking about those very long-term decisions is about including more of the, the community as it exists in Australia. So it's not really about engineering and those professional disciplines. It's more about, what do we want as an Australian community and how do we make that happen? So I suppose our decision makers and the groups that we work in should reflect the Australian community. There's still plenty of way that we can go towards making that happen.
When we first started talking about this group, setting up this group, I think one of the moments I shared with you was when I came back to Australia, I noticed quite a difference in the number of women I was working with in the oil and gas space compared with other locations around the world that I've been based. But I think where there is perhaps great opportunity for representation is at the senior levels and in our ability to influence. So it's less of a question for me about women being represented and more so a question of who is at the table and who do you put your name behind and whose name do you raise in conversations about who to look for succession planning and the next stage. And I think there is a significant gap. There's certainly a pipeline I can see in the oil and gas industry in Australia, but I think there is a halving when we arrive at senior management or CEO level in terms of representation. And if this group has the opportunity to shape some of that thinking, then I think that's a win for us.
Yeah, and I would add a footnote to that. Decommissioning is quite unique, I think, as an industry because it does have such an international talent pool. Like to your point, there's a lot of that rubber band effect, people leaving Australia, coming back from overseas and the like. That means that we've got a huge depth of cultural diversity as well of people that are coming and working in this space. So I would always say that, you can never be diverse enough. And I've learned not to ever presume that you have reached that perfect diversity sweet spot because the person not sitting at the table will view us differently than our view from around the table. So I think constantly pushing ourselves and really actively trying to draw in different cultural representation as well is really important because it is that intersectionality between gender and all the other factors.
Yeah. I was actually going to reverse the question to Rean and say, well, what does diverse enough look like?
Yeah, that's it's always easier to ask the questions and throw them out there than to answer them. I guess Australia is a very diverse country. We've got so many backgrounds. Half of us are immigrants, if not more, at least first generation. And then on top of that, there's also the Indigenous community and the representation there. Certainly when I worked at NOPSEMA, I was the chair of the Reconciliation Action Plan, and that was very rewarding for me. And I have a little smile on my face every time NOPSEMA does a little rap-oriented activity during Reconciliation Week, because I know that in a way I was part of that journey for NOPSEMA. So I think that there's more to diversity than just men and women. I think there's also diversity in cultural experiences. So yeah.
And the international nature of the industry is very interesting as well. I get the opportunity to go and spend time in other countries, and I was trying to remember when everyone else was talking. I was at a conference, I think in Brunei, maybe 2 years or so ago, and at the end of it, someone actually said to me, "Isn't it remarkable how many young women are in this room and presenting?" And you see that, and then you come back to Australia and you go back into another event, and it's back to the same old. But you go to other different parts of the world that the mix is so different. But then I also get I get to go up to Norway once or twice a year to the 2 events up there. Go to real interesting events there where the mix in the audience is very 50-50. The mix on the stage, more like 80-20 on a good year, 90-10. And I don't need to say which side the 90 is on this one. I can see from all the nods from the rest of you in the room here. And we are still definitely short of getting representative speakers and that modelling piece, back to where we were much earlier in the conversation, the modelling piece for people to be able to see themselves on the stage.
Do you think we'll get there? Do you think we'll get to 5-10 years from now where we won't even be thinking about this, or it won't be needed? We won't need a women in whatever group.
I don't know that we'll ever get there. I think we've got, but I don't think we should ever assume that we are there, because once you assume that you're there, you stop doing it and you can revert back to kind. I think we always have to assume that we could do better, whether it's gender. When you get to a reasonable degree of parity with it, when it's gender, then you've got to look at ethnicity, you've got to look at age, you've got to look at all sorts of other factors that go in there as well. So I don't think we should. I am very hopeful that we will get toward there, but whether we will actually, in my mind, whether we'll ever get there, maybe a bit skeptical.
Rean, I'd hypothesize that we won't get there fast enough. I'd love to think it's a 5-10 year journey, but I think history has demonstrated that's not the case. And when you look at the numbers, and Simona, you touched on it, we're not even close to parity, then let alone going to what Pav was intimating. Equality and equity are 2 different conversations, and we can't treat all women as falling into one bucket and that we're all homogenous, because we all have different skill sets, different needs, different backgrounds and different abilities. So I think that equity piece is really something that isn't quite embraced by industry yet. And that's not just the decommissioning industry, it's across the board. We keep having a gendered conversation. We're not really unpacking, well, what does it look like for different women, different needs, in order to truly give inclusion and access. So it's a long way to go, but I think these special interest groups are absolutely necessary.
So on that, what if we were all starting again and you see your younger self and you're thinking about a career in decommissioning, what advice would you give your younger self if you wanted to have a career in decommissioning?
Do the CODA Introduction to Decommissioning course.
So
that's
really good advice.
Shameless plug.
It's a shameless plug, but it's also a fantastic sort of taster as to what is this beast called decommissioning really all about. And I think people walk away from that going, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. It's like we said when we started on, it's not just engineering. Everyone thinks that decommissioning is an engineering exercise. To me, it's an exercise in trust. And if we can build trust, we can do those activities in the offshore marine space with the trust of the community. So it's about building trust in that space.
And there's nothing like hands-on experience. So get involved, get a project, do anything, you will learn. And there's nothing like what you will learn doing it directly. There's no comparison.
Yeah, and I think career options wise, Perth is a great place to be working in resources. There's a lot of opportunity here. I guess looking back at the workplaces I've been myself, have been at companies that do some decommissioning and some other parts of offshore energy or even onshore energy and resources. Like there's, I suppose I started in a consulting company that did a lot of different types of things, and I still work in a consulting company a bit like that now. So being able to work in one of those places and get exposure to lots of different things is great. And then you can just follow whichever, stream really appeals to you the most. At XODUS, we have quite a good structure in that we have a fairly small specialised decommissioning team, but we get to bring people from the other teams in on our projects all the time. So we kind of get to share that project learning and those expertise around and develop them in between, across the hub. And I think that's a really good model. If a person in Perth wanted to get exposure to decommissioning, I think just try and work in one of those places that crosses a few different types of industries, and you'll get those opportunities.
Absolutely. Did anyone else want to add anything on that? No? Okay. So just wanted to thank you, Pia and Carrie and Pav and Francis and Simona for coming to today's podcast. And I'd just like to finish by saying that in order for us to have a more diverse and inclusive decommissioning industry, we need men and women to participate in those conversations. So email us and call us and join on to the special interest group and let's start having those conversations.
Thank you, Rean. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.